And good evening, fellow listeners and followers. Today is Sunday, August 11th at 8:35 p.m. This is Federico Lyons at States Rights Radio and
Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight's episode, 2 labor-supported VP picks and a very uncertain, unpredictable win on free speech. So obviously since the last time we talked, Kamala Harris has made her vice president pick, which is Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. Obviously, people are digging into his record and, trying to find whether if you're on the Trump side, you're trying to find dirt, or on the Democrat side, you're trying to just praise him for everything he's done. And, it's the same goes for J.D. Vance, vice versa. And but the way I see it is they're basically, there's very big similarities between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, such as a military record that isn't exactly what they're portraying. Both of them, neither of them saw combat, neither of them were soldiers, but they're gonna put forward that they are, or they were, and so there's a lot of similarities in what I'm seeing between the two, but what else is new? The Democrats and Republicans are the same.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that worries me is that, both of them are big for big labor union. J.D. Vance has spoken at UAW conferences, and of course Tim Walz is a big labor. Again, the name of the Minnesota Democratic Party is the Democratic Farmers Labor Party, so you can get away from labor in Minnesota. And, one thing that kind of worries me is that, in Fox News, they had Mark Mix, the president of the National Right to Work Committee, speak that Kamala Harris wants to repeal all right to work laws. And, I don't think that they're going to try to repeal 14B, the Taft-Hartley Act again. They failed once. I don't think they want to bring it again. But, something that Mark Mix failed is that, the Republican Party had the Teamsters president speak at their GOP convention. And, it's just very shocking to see, even among the delegates and the gallery, praise a Teamsters union, all because he says that he wants to bring jobs and jobs for America and blah, 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 blah. But, the Republican Party was once a party of workers' freedoms and workers' rights. J.D. Vance is from Ohio, and I think that Robert A. Taft, another person from Ohio, is probably kicking himself in the rear for having this type of person, in politics. Yeah, I doubt Robert A. Taft would have welcomed the Teamsters president in the 1952 convention. So it's very, very weird when you see the similarities of both parties, both welcoming, big labor, which means that, they're not going to create jobs. They're just going to create labor for their own pockets and a little kickback for them on their side. So, I don't trust Kamala Harris as much as I don't trust J.D. Vance on labor politics, because they're going to be siding with labor. I don't care if J.D. Vance signed 100% the National Right to Work survey, but it's very unhard. I see no differences in those two, or in Trump. Trump has been, Trump has never really called for the National Right to Work Act or for workers' rights. He's always had union labor up in New Jersey and New York, and always gave his construction contracts to union labor. So I really see no support for workers' rights for Trump. I don't think he was very worker friendly. And these two picks, I think they're trying to control the labor of Ohio and Pennsylvania and the Great Lakes states. And it's now to see who controls the workers. And, you saw one thing said, you saw in Michigan, they repealed the right to work law up there in Michigan under Gretchen Wilmer, which was very sad, but, it is what it is. But I just don't see any differences between those two, Trump or Kamala or Vance and Walz. I see no difference. I see the same Democratic Republican Party, and it's a shame that they went so far from the leaders of Fred Hartley and Robert Taft to now being supported by Union thugs from Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I think people need to recognize. I've written something on J.D. Vance, and already had some feedback from people who didn't like that I was presenting an honest look at who J.D. Vance is. All of these people they're politicians. They're gonna sell you a narrative. Why do you trust any of them? Tim Walz is not who he's portraying himself to be. J.D. Vance is not who he's portraying himself to be. And, even on that, the worst thing is, like J.D. Vance, for instance, he portrays himself as a populist. But he really is a technocrat who's really aligned to big corporate interests when it comes to the military-industrial complex, big pharma, and things like that. He's not a populist, but even if he were a populist, I don't like populism either. It's not a governing philosophy. Populism is socialism. Why do people trust the narratives? That's the question I keep thinking about, and but people need to live in their illusion that these people are going to save them from something that they're not, and we need to kind of call this out every chance we get. But I also look at much like Vance and Trump, I can't listen too long to Harris or Tim Walz, but I've seen some clips of Tim Walz. I think he's a good actor. He presents himself as this kind of normal Midwestern guy when he's just a big government socialist Democrat. So I understand though that politics is all personalities today, and it's disgusting to me that this is what people want. It's a popularity contest, but on that front, I think Tim Walz comes across well to a lot of Americans. He doesn't to me, as I recognize he's a liar like they all are, but it's we'll see what happens with that.
Well, he's from Minnesota. Is he born and raised from Minnesota?
No, he actually was born in Nebraska.
Oh, Nebraska. So he doesn't have that Minnesota Brainerd accent, eh? Yeah. I don't think I've heard him say. I don't think I've heard him say that Minnesota accent, but from Minnesota. But you're right. They're all actors, and then you had J.D. Vance portraying himself as a populist of man of the people in his novel Hillbilly and Elegy. And when have we ever seen a hillbilly from Cincinnati? I mean, I'm still trying to think where you see that. So there again, it's a lying narrative, and of course the people will buy into that. And the same thing with Walz and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, she is black. I think her father is Jamaican and her mother is Hindu, but this is where something that, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they don't want to put up a candidate of black American culture and, historical essence. They don't want to put up somebody who really grew up in the South to run for president. Because, if I were black and I see Kamala Harris running for president, or even Barack Obama when he ran for president, how can he really relate to the blacks that suffered in the South, that suffered with the hands of segregation and violence? I don't see how black Americans voted for Barack Obama, because if I were black, I couldn't relate to him, because his father was African, his mother was white, he lived mostly with his white grandparents. So they're selling a narrative that he was within that bigotry and all that, which is fine. There is some sense of bigotry in the North where he went to school, but yet again, in the South, the majority of Southern blacks voted for Barack Obama, and they're probably going to vote for Kamala Harris. And then you have, and then you have on the other side the Trump, the Midwest and the Southern whites that relate to Trump. I go, how can you relate to a New Yorker? You're from Atlanta or Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee. How can you relate to a New Yorker that, it's a slumlord? I mean, they're selling a narrative and all that people buy into this crap. And it's a shame that, they're really buying into this narrative of Kamala and Walz, who's supposed to be a Midwestern kind of guy. And then you have J.D. Vance, a populist hillbilly from Cincinnati. And, his wife is, no importance of what his wife is, but, I just, they've always been selling a narrative, and it's very sad. They did it with Reagan, they did it with Bush, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas. When is it going to end to end this celebrity status of running candidates for president? Because that's what we are. It's like a celebrity status, and the Celebrity Apprentice or whatever, and it's just there's no end to this celebrity. Celebrity status of future politics, future presentation of politics. There's no end to it, and people will go on and keep supporting that because they like the narrative. They like to be bamboozled. They really do, and I feel sad for those people that are being bamboozled because they need to wake up.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about how both sides are in support of unions and everything, and it really is concerning how the cognitive dissonance that I see in so many. When you got, I've got a lot of Trump supporting friends who, were posting when Tim Walz was picked. They were saying, lockdowns are coming back because Tim Walz once said that gathering in large numbers in church, we simply don't want that happening. Well, here's a quote from Donald Trump during Easter of 2020. This Easter will be much different than others because in many cases we'll be separated physically from our churches. So it's essentially the same quote. But they can't see it in their guy. They can't see that Trump is the one who locked us down initially. Tim Walz was a COVID tyrant. I agree completely. But so was Trump. How can you make the case for your guy when your guy's the exact same as the opponent? And it's just we need to stop putting all this faith in these politicians. I wrote something today. I shared the Rutherford Institute's most recent column about, how politics has become our national religion. And it's just there's so much blasphemy and idolatry going on. And it's because most Americans want a strong president. Well, this is the exact opposite of what the founders envisioned. I mean, George Washington could have been king, and he said, no, I'm going to be a lowly president. I'm going to be a servant of the people, not their master. But people want masters, and I don't get it. I don't want to be a slave to this state, but it's because we've got such a massive government that people find it so important that their guy gets in. Well, we need to shut down every aspect of the government that is unconstitutional, which is the vast, vast majority of it. But people want to live in their little pipe dreams that, their politician is going to make their life better and the other guy is going to make their life worse when, we need to take ownership over our own lives. And Tim Walz, a big liar like them all. Don't trust the narrative that they'll paint him as something that he's not. And the same thing for J.D. Vance, same thing for Trump and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is, being painted from the right as she wants to defund the police. Well, remember, Kamala Harris was the police. She was the top cop in her where she was in California when she was a prosecutor, and that was a big thing previously when Tulsi Gabbard took her down in the Democrat debates back in 2020. Was that Kamala Harris was very much in favor of arresting people for petty drug offenses. So, it's just, don't listen to the narratives from the people who are, trying to sell you something that is not true. Think for yourself and do your own research on all these people.
No, absolutely right, Seth. And, the thing is that, going back to why this subject is two Labor-supported VP picks is, like I said, it's quite unnerving to see a Republican Party at the beck and call of Teamsters and Labor. But again, and you're right, Donald Trump is, if they're going to pick Tim Walz and Kamala Harris as pro-union, so is Donald Trump, so is J.D. Vance. So is Ron DeSantis of Florida. He spoke in Chicago with the big at a law enforcement unions conference. So this thing where they say that I support right to work or I support labor worker rights. No, you don't. You want to get that money. You want to sell to get those funds for your campaign, for your own little piggy bank. So it's quite sad when again they punish one narrative like Walz, but then they don't do it for J.D. Vance or they don't do it for Trump. And like you said, Tim Walz when he was governor, he locked down Minnesota, but then Trump initiated that. And Trump made a lot of stuff that initiated other state governments to lock us down. Florida, for once, Florida was not very friendly to many people. Many hotels were locked down and shut down for a month or so, and it really hurt a lot of people. So Ron DeSantis is no savior, no help. So this narrative needs to stop, and this two-party system needs to just hold on and say there is no difference in one or the other. There really isn't. It's one of the same, and people need to focus on that. It's not it's no longer Democrat or Republican. It's now combined a Democratic Republican Party trying to help in their own mutual aid society. And I recall 1993. They did it once and they will do it again, and they call themselves now by bipartisanship. Enough is enough to, both are, there is no lesser of two evils. Both of them are just evil, plain and simple.
Yeah. And again, it's just that there's so much hypocrisy going on. Again, another thing with the COVID tyranny, I see a lot of people posting about how Tim Walz had a lottery for people who took the vaccine or the bioweapon shot. It's not even a vaccine, but he ran a lottery in his state for people who took the shot. And, they're painting this as a Democrat thing. Well, it was Ohio's Republican governor who was the first to announce a lottery for people who took the shot. So, it's so in our face how much they're the same, and yet people want to believe there's a difference, and there just isn't. Both parties want to control our lives, and we need to not let them.
Yeah, and the federal government wants to control our lives, and ever since 1798, federal government, under John Adams, and then you had a little bit of peaceful times with Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. Quincy Adams was not good. Then you had Andrew Jackson, and he was the biggest tyrant of them all. And then when I see Trump invoke quotes from Andrew Jackson, I my blood boils, because that's something that's no one I don't want to get a quote from Andrew Jackson. But it's sad that people, like you said before a couple of minutes ago, that they want a master, they want a tyrant for president, and that's not really what the framers envisioned the executive branch for the federal government or for individual state governments. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, the executive is a weakling, and the power lies with the legislature. I'd rather be ruled by 1,000 men than by one man, because at least with 1,000 men, there is a vote, there is a conscience to deny tyranny. With one man, it's either his way or no other way, and I don't want that. I don't want to be like Venezuela or Cuba or China or Russia with Putin. So, and our most sacred right, which is the First Amendment, is under fire. And this latest ruling, I don't see that it's a win for the First Amendment. So correct me if I'm wrong, Seth, but I just see it very unpredictable, very uncertain of a ruling for this. What do you say?
Yeah, well, first off, I know it was a 9-0 decision, so that tends to tell you, when they're all on the same side, it's probably not good. I don't completely think that we need to kind of discuss what exactly are our First Amendment rights when it comes to social media platforms. I mean, I don't like the censorship that I'm seeing, but I've always been a free market guy. So if it's private businesses, they have the right to regulate. But on the other hand, there's a lot of government interference and a lot of government funding going to these platforms, but we don't know. I just think, we need to have a larger conversation as Americans and how much dependency we have on these social media platforms. There's a whole real world out there, and I think people spend way too much time in virtual reality. And see, that's a more important discussion to me. Whether this is protecting our First Amendment or violating it, I'm not completely sure, but I think that it just kind of illuminates the kind of virtual status that we're all in, that we just spend so much time online and we're not talking to people physically and in person anymore. And I think that's a more important discussion to have.
Well, you're right, and it was a 9-0 decision. So, I mean, I know that people like former Justice Ginsburg was always on the side of the First Amendment, even though Katie Couric said otherwise, that she actually did not like the people kneeling when the anthem was playing, which I think that's a bit of a MAGA-ish on Justice Ginsburg's part. But I know that Justice Scalia was always for the First Amendment. So to see Kagan joined by Roberts, Sotomayor, Kavanaugh, Barrett, Jackson, and in concurrence opinions to Thomas and Alito with Gorsuch, this has become the age of unpredictability. And I was going to make a show last week on uncertainty and unpredictability or constancy. There's no longer any concrete contest of a candidate. It's now very unpredictable because you don't know where Trump stands. You don't know where Kamala's going to stand, because when she was a prosecutor and she supported, she says she wants ICE abolished, but then she doesn't want ICE abolished. So we've come to an age of unpredictability that it's scary. So when I read this ruling, I mean, it is unpredictable. It is uncertain. So they relay these cases back to the lower courts because there's no proper analysis of facial First Amendment challenges to these Florida and Texas internet platforms. It's quite simple. These internet platforms are private companies, and private companies are not subject to government protection because it's private. It doesn't say Twitter shall make no law. It doesn't say Costco shall make no law. It says Congress shall make no law. In the eyes of a public on the public platform, government has no right to shut you out. And I mentioned this to Seth before we began the show that back in the 1970s, this young man wore a T-shirt that says "F the draft," entering a courthouse. Well, he was arrested then in public property. It's his First Amendment to say "F the draft" or burn an American flag. It's his First Amendment right if standing in a public platform. But when you're standing in but yet again, when you're standing in a private area, in a private platform, whether it's social media or in the steps of Walmart or Costco or whatever, you're subject to their jurisdiction. You're subject to their banning because it's their company. It's not the government. So you have no right. If you don't like Walmart, well, then don't shop there. Go to Winn-Dixie. Go to Publix. Go to Kroger's. You don't like Twitter, well, you go to Facebook. Go to Truth Social, which I think they've been banning more people on Truth Social than Twitter or X. So it's the consumer to decide. It's not the government to decide for us. It's the consumer to decide. But yet again, how far is the government into the pockets of social media or any platform? For example, my university was a Catholic university, a private Catholic university, and even though it's private, they held prayers in classes, but they also accepted federal grants, federal funds. So isn't that now a public platform because they accept federal funding? Just because they hide on a private platform known as the Catholic Church doesn't mean that, they're safe to have prayers in classes. So, it's quite simple. How far is this government in these platforms? And if Twitter does receive federal funds, then it becomes a government-sponsored entity. Then they cannot shut you out and silence you. But that's my only concern is that Twitter doesn't make the laws. Congress makes the law, and Congress shall make no law with infringing on your speech or your in a public platform. And that's my only So knowing this case, going back to the lower courts, I need to see what the 11th Circuit and the 5th Circuit Court said. But, there is no First Amendment challenge to these because it's private companies. So I think it's not really a win on First Amendment. It's a win on private ownership and conducting that they can do whatever they want as long as they don't receive federal funds.
Yeah, I think that lies where the issue is how there's a lot of shady things surrounding the creation of many like Facebook. There was the CIA or DARPA was working on something called LifeLog that was basically the government was going to track and control. They wanted to track all the data of all Americans. And suddenly, when Facebook was announced, LifeLog went offline. They stopped looking at LifeLog. And there's a lot of shady things about the creation of these social media companies. I don't like the censorship. I just also don't spend my life on social media. So it doesn't... I don't like this debate because I think nobody's really looking at the real issues and, the technocratic gulags that they're trying to put us in. And I want us to get back to the real world and get out of virtual reality, which nobody seems to want to discuss that. But it's... look, the First Amendment it's against the government censoring us. But social media, we get this, if they're truly private, then, they can operate however they want. But are they truly private? These are discussions that there needs to be a whole lot more research done. But people just want to, have a surface level discussion that takes us nowhere. So, look, I think if anything, our government shows that they don't like our First Amendment. I think that's clear. So, this probably was not a good thing for the First Amendment. The Supreme Court doesn't like the First Amendment type. But on the other hand, if they're private companies, they're allowed to censor. But this is not ultimately the discussion we need to have as a society. But until we start having that, I'm not going to get too worked up over what's happening on these social media platforms. I mean, I've been censored by Facebook posting our episodes several times, and I don't like it, but what am I going to do? But there's a real world, and that's where we need to use our free speech and get out of the virtual reality.
No, I think the Supreme Court does protect our First Amendment right when it needs to be protected. For example, I mean, they do protect it to the Nazis. Back in 1980, they gave the Nazis the right to march as far as their First Amendment right. To the Black Panthers, they said that Muhammad Ali had all the rights under the First Amendment to deny being drafted. The Supreme Court will protect our First Amendment rights, I think, because, again, which again is I don't think it's very unpredictable, because people like Alito, even though I don't agree with the Westboro Baptist Church, Alito cited against them on their First Amendment right. And once you silence one group, you're going to silence all of us, and I don't want that. I may not agree with what you say, but as Seth has pointed out, and I will point out again, I will defend your right to say it. I may not like it. When KKK, Black Panthers, Nazis, communists, I don't like their rhetoric. I think it is rhetoric. But as long as they're on a public platform, they have every right to say it. I'll ignore them because I think they're talking gibberish, and I will not pay attention to them. But I will ignore them. On Facebook, I remember working for a very right-wing media company, and they were always attacking Amazon and Twitter and Facebook for shadow banning groups and stuff like that. I go, but again, it's their private. No, how private it is, we don't know. Do they accept government funds? If they accept government funds, then all private levels are off the table because they're now becoming entities. But I will always respect people's opinions, even though if I don't agree with them. And people need to respect other people's opinion and have a discussion, have an open discussion and what their beliefs are, because that's the genius of America. That's the genius of the framers, to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, to say what you say and mean what you say. For example, I posted on Facebook a question that if states can give driver's licenses and driver licenses are accepted across state lines, why can't states issue union passports and be accepted like driver's licenses? Because I don't believe the federal government has any right to issue union passports. People have disagreed with me on that, but that's my belief. That's how I read the Naturalization Clause. That's how I read the Constitution. If other people don't see it that way, I'm not going to call them stupid. I'm not going to call them ignorant. I'm just going to accept their opinion and agreement, and that's what we are. So we need to get back, even on social media. I'm on social media a lot, and I welcome opinions all around. As long as you respect mine, I'll respect yours. But, it's time to, even in social media, to have these debates and have these discussions, because if we don't, on social media or on live, we're not going to get anywhere. And, frankly, with Trump or Walz or Kamala or Vance, we're still not going to get anywhere, because, it's either my way or the highway. And that's not how America was built.
Yeah, and yeah, it's we need to kind of step back and have discussions on principles here, and everybody's too wedded about their team sports politics that they can't have these discussions. We need to break from this two-party illusion and discuss as real people.
Yeah, exactly. So, with that being said, we're gonna keep on monitoring this election debacle of Harris, Walz, Trump fans. I saw that Trump was in Montana. I couldn't believe it, the state that I really enjoyed living in. The big sky country has become really MAGA-ish. I know that Seth was in vacation in one of the Great Lakes that also is very MAGA-ish. I just laugh at it. I just think it's funny. But yet again, it's sad that people are, indebted to one person, one leader, when that's not how this country was established, to be followed by one leader, one person. But, we'll see how that goes. I still not plan to vote for either of them, for neither team. I don't think that they bring my ideas to the table. They just bring their ideas or other ideas to the table. So that being said, I just hope people are smart in this election and see that both parties, both candidates or VP candidates are one and the same. And we'll just keep reporting that, and I know both Seth and I both sound like a broken record, but itchy and irritating is gonna do something. So I know some people are gonna find it itchy and irritating, but it's starting to make sense. So we're gonna keep doing it. We're gonna keep playing the same record, but I want people to really understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, and I'll just end with a great quote from PJ O'Rourke: "Don't vote; it just encourages the bastards."
That's true. Good. That's a good one. Yeah, exactly. It just encourages them. Encourage them to continue with this debacle. So that's a good quote. So say it again.
Don't vote; it just encourages the bastards.
Yeah, exactly. That's a funny one. Good ending, Seth. And with that, hope to see you next Sunday. And for that, have yourself a great night.
Yep, good night.